Chapter 1: The Departure. In a small, forgotten corner of Tennessee, where the winding dirt roads threaded through the lush Appalachian hills, lived Samuel Miller. Sam, as everyone called him, was a family man in his early 40s with deep-set brown eyes and hands roughened by years of working the land. He had spent most of his life in the village of Pine Hollow, where the air smelled of fresh earth and pine sap, and where people lived slow, quiet lives. But life had not been easy for Sam. He and his wife, Mary, had 3 children, Sarah, 12, Jacob, 10, and little Emily, just 5 years old. The family survived on what little Sam could scrape from farming a small plot of land left by his father. But times had changed. Crops didn't yield like they used to, the cost of living had climbed, and medical bills for Emily's recurring asthma were piling up. After months of agonizing over the decision, Sam finally made up his mind: he would go to the city. He'd heard tales of people making good money there, and with his family's future hanging in the balance, he couldn't afford to stay rooted in Pine Hollow any longer. The day he left was somber. The small village had gathered at the bus stop to bid him farewell, some offering words of encouragement, others casting doubtful glances. Mary, her eyes red and puffy from crying, stood clutching little Emily's hand. "You'll come back soon, won't you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "I promise." "I'll make enough to bring us all to the city," Sam replied, trying to sound confident. But in his heart, he felt the weight of uncertainty. Chapter 2: The City Beckons. Sam arrived in Nashville at dawn. The city was a vast expanse of concrete, glass, and noise that overwhelmed his senses. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and food carts, and the steady hum of traffic was a far cry from the chirping birds and rustling trees back home. Sam felt like a small fish in a vast ocean. With a little money he had saved, Sam found a rundown apartment in a part of the city people called the Flats. The building was old and grimy, with peeling paint and broken windows patched with cardboard. The walls were thin, and Sam could hear his neighbors arguing through them. The first challenge came with finding a job. Sam wasn't picky, he'd grown up doing hard labor, so he figured any job that paid was good enough. He tried construction sites, but they were already full. He went to a local diner, but they said he didn't have the experience. Day after day, Sam walked the streets of Nashville, going from one place to the next, trying to find work. After 2 weeks of searching, Sam finally landed a job as a janitor in a high-rise office building downtown. It wasn't glamorous, and the hours were long, but it paid a steady wage. He worked nights, mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms, and emptying trash cans. The work was physically exhausting, and by the time his shift ended at dawn, his back ached, and his feet throbbed. But every dollar he earned brought him one step closer to his goal. Chapter 3: Struggles in the Shadows. Despite having a job, life in the city wasn't easy for Sam. His rent ate up most of his paycheck, and the cost of living in Nashville was higher than he'd anticipated. He sent what little money he could spare back to Mary and the kids, but it wasn't enough. Every phone call home filled him with guilt as Mary tried to reassure him that they were getting by, though he could hear the strain in her voice. Sam felt isolated in the city. He missed his family, missed the quiet of Pine Hollow. The people in Nashville were always rushing, always looking down at their phones, and no one had time to stop and talk. Sam spent his nights cleaning empty offices and his days in his tiny apartment, too tired to do much of anything else. The loneliness weighed on him. One evening, after finishing his shift, Sam sat at a nearby park, gazing at the city lights flickering in the distance. He thought about giving up, about going back to Pine Hollow where life, though hard, was familiar. But then he thought of his children, of Sarah's bright eyes when she talked about wanting to go to college, of Jacob's love for books and dreams of becoming a writer, of Emily's laughter despite her struggles with asthma. He couldn't give up. They were counting on him. Chapter 4: The Turning Point. Months passed, and Sam continued working as a janitor. One day, while cleaning the office of a real estate company, he overheard a conversation between two executives about a project that needed laborers. It was a construction job, and they were having trouble finding enough people to meet the deadline. Without hesitation, Sam approached one of the men and asked if they were hiring. The executive looked at Sam's worn-out uniform and skeptical eyes, but desperation made him nod. "Be at the site tomorrow at 6 a.m. sharp," the man said, scribbling down an address. The next morning, Sam arrived at the construction site, a massive commercial project on the outskirts of the city. The work was grueling, even more so than his janitorial job. He hauled heavy materials, operated machinery he wasn't familiar with, and worked under the scorching Tennessee sun. But the pay was better, and after 2 weeks, he was able to send more money back home. As Sam gained more experience, the foreman began trusting him with bigger responsibilities. He learned quickly, and soon enough, he became a reliable member of the crew. The work was still hard, but it came with a sense of accomplishment, and for the first time in months, Sam felt like he was making real progress. Chapter 5: Setbacks and Sacrifices. Just when things seemed to be looking up, disaster struck. One afternoon, while working on scaffolding, Sam slipped and fell. Though it wasn't a long fall, he landed awkwardly, and his ankle twisted painfully beneath him. He was taken to the hospital, where doctors told him he had a severe sprain and would need to rest for at least 6 weeks. The injury was a huge blow. Sam couldn't work, and without income, he quickly fell behind on rent and bills. He tried applying for financial assistance, but the process was slow, and he wasn't familiar with navigating the bureaucratic red tape of the city. His savings dwindled, and soon enough, eviction notices began piling up on his door. Desperate, Sam reached out to his boss at the real estate company, hoping for some form of compensation or advance payment. But the man coldly informed him that he was a day laborer, not a salaried employee, and therefore wasn't entitled to any benefits. Sam was crushed. Back home, Mary was struggling too. Emily's asthma had worsened, and without enough money for proper treatment, they had to rely on local clinics, which were often overcrowded. Sam felt helpless as Mary's voice trembled over the phone, and for the first time since arriving in Nashville, he considered returning to Pine Hollow in defeat. Chapter 6: A Ray of Hope. Just when Sam thought he couldn't sink any lower, a stroke of luck came his way. One evening, while sitting on a bench near the hospital, Sam struck up a conversation with a man named Frank, who worked in property management. Frank, a kind-hearted man in his 50s, took an immediate liking to Sam. After hearing his story, Frank offered him a part-time job managing a small apartment building on the east side of town. The job was modest, cleaning common areas, handling minor repairs, but it came with free housing in one of the building's units. Sam eagerly accepted, grateful for the chance to get back on his feet. With a roof over his head and some income coming in, Sam started to regain his confidence. He continued working at the building while slowly recovering from his injury. As he regained his strength, he returned to the construction site part-time. The double workload was exhausting, but Sam had become accustomed to hardship. Chapter 7: Building a Future. Over time, Sam's reputation as a hard worker grew. Frank introduced him to other property managers, and soon Sam had multiple side jobs repairing apartments and maintaining buildings. His construction job also picked up, and he was offered a permanent position with better pay and benefits. For the first time since arriving in Nashville, Sam felt like he was truly making progress. He saved enough money to pay off his debts and send substantial support to Mary and the kids. He even started talking with Mary about moving the family to Nashville, though she was hesitant to leave Pine Hollow. Months turned into a year, and Sam's life, though still challenging, had transformed. He had learned to navigate the complexities of city life and found a community of people who supported him. He'd also come to appreciate the opportunities the city offered, opportunities that could help him fulfill the dreams he had for his family. Chapter 8: Coming Home. One warm evening, a year and a half after he first arrived in Nashville, Sam stepped off the bus in Pine Hollow. His heart raced with excitement as he saw Mary and the kids waiting for him at the station. Emily, now 6, ran into his arms, her asthma much improved thanks to the treatment Sam had been able to afford. Sarah and Jacob followed, their faces glowing with pride. Mary embraced him tightly, tears in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. "I couldn't have done it without you," Sam replied, his voice thick with emotion. Sam had come back to Pine Hollow, but it wasn't for long. This time, he wasn't returning in defeat. He had saved enough to bring his family to the city, where they could start a new chapter together. Nashville, once a place of struggle and hardship, had become a place of hope and opportunity. As they loaded into the old truck to head back home, Sam looked out at the familiar landscape of rolling hills and tall trees. He knew he would always miss Pine Hollow, but the city had given him something he hadn't found here, a future. And as the truck rattled down the dusty road, Sam smiled, knowing that he was finally on the path to fulfilling his dreams.